Good morning. First of all, thank you very much to Professor Bill Buchanan, OBE. Very proud of you. This is a great event, and it's a real privilege for me to be among you. My talk is rather more general, perhaps, to the theme today, because when Bill asked me, I was wondering when I'm going to talk to a set of security experts who perhaps know even more than I do about security, so what's the point of trying to tell them something? So maybe if I take a side swipe and talk about things which we had of interest. Oh, that's not quite showing there. Is there? Ah, that's better. You wouldn't know what I'm talking about otherwise, would you? So looking at the theme, big data, looking at everywhere now, everyone talks about the Internet of Things and the Internet anywhere and everywhere. And it brought me back to thinking about some projects that we did. I should say I worked for the University of Sharjah as the Dean of Science, but prior to that I used to work for Liverpool John Moores University for 24 years, where a lot of my work on networking and security and others was done. And the last few years we're trying to start a new team in Dubai way for people who don't know the area to see what we can do for development. And then it came back to me that a few years before we got interested as a sideways, really as a hobby, to see how do you capture human digital memories. And so my theme will be going back a little bit about what are human digital memories and what do we mean by them? How do they link up with IoT and how would one use them? And then, of course, to go back to this theme of security, we would look a little bit about big data and its effects on security and others, and maybe some ideas about we would need to look at collectively, or the wider community, what we need to do to make sure that we are safe in this space. So, human life, digital memories. This is really a concept to link up with the humanity. Everyone, all societies, treasure their memories, treasure their histories, and they're all over the world. And without them, we are not humane. So that is a challenge for humanity in how to keep, how to store, how to retrieve, how to alter data and memory about it, whether in the old fashion or the new fashion. And then this program is also international. UNESCO a few years ago launched a program about guarding what they call against general amnesia, and particularly for societies like the Aborigines in Australia who don't have written stories. They tend to tell them. I think everyone is familiar. So in those cases, how do we capture them? And it goes to other nations who are perhaps more developed in storing and retrieving data, like the US. There is a Congress act that says they want to preserve radio communications programs from the 20s and 30s, early radio. And actually, this is preserved. So with all of those, people have been thinking about what do we do? It takes us even further back. Those of you, and I think most of the population here, audience, are from the UK, so you will all be familiar with William the Conqueror in 1085, when he created the Domesday as the end of the world catalogue of the landowners, I think mostly for political reasons, but nonetheless is a true record of England in particular, but Britain in general, of what people did and how they owned and what kind of resources they had or what they make use. 900 years after that, those of you who are of my generation would remember the BBC with Acorn and others did a new program to look at, can we do snapshots in 2004, I think it was, where we'd say, shall we try to redo that again? And they took 1 million people, and then they interviewed them, and they kept a lot of the information. But what they did is they kept it in the PC, and these actually are the machines that they used. And what happened 10, 15 years after? Technology's changed. We all work in technology that changes all the time. And then, well, you cannot access it anymore now. Perhaps it'll be a good idea if we change it to the new media, and that's what we do all the time in IT. And they came across a problem. Because to transfer it to a new media, you will have to have permission from the 1 million people that they interviewed. They can just move it. And of course, resource-wise, they could not go back and find 1 million people again and inquire with them. So that program got stopped. And a journalist, Paul Whitley, from the Observer Guardian group, had this comment in one of the articles. It's ironic that the 15-year-old is now unreadable, but the original Domesday, it still is because it's in paper. And it's a good job that Shakespeare wrote it on paper and didn't write it onto the PC. This is actually a very good point for us as a technology evangelist, and I'm one, because we are excited by technology and we want to do these things. And what happened when we do them? Of course, to do that, there are a number of theoretical challenges. How to make use of data and how to retrieve it, to organize it, to search it into all of those things. And then how do you find the right memory? And this is very, very important. And even more important in today's age is how to share it with other people. And in 2004, there was a British Computer Society, and I think the Royal Society support, commissioned a set of experts, Professor Sir Tony Hoare, and from Edinburgh itself, Professor the late Robert Milner, who then was the head of the Department of Computer Science in Cambridge, Oxford and Cambridge, and Tony Hoare. Now, as you all know, they're both Turing awardees in computer science and in IT, came up with the program of the 10 biggest challenges in the next 50 years for computer science, because they're coming from computer science. And one of the areas they identified was to capture human digital memories. I'm a person who always worked in networking and in security in the latter years, but I got rather intrigued. Well, what would you need to do from a technology point of view? So I've been lucky enough to get a PhD students to look at actually storing and retrieving and getting data as a startup. And then perhaps this is the beauty of working in academia. If you get the right people, you can do whatever you want to do as a hobby. And literally, this was a hobby project for me, not my line of work. Looking at peer-to-peer, since we were in networking, can we use peer-to-peer to capture and exchange information? And we did another PhD. And the main theme of it was really what we need to do is are always driven as human beings by that serendipitous moment where we think, what did I do that 20 years ago? Why did I take this path? Wouldn't it be nice to go and look and find that out? So we came up with a thought of having event threads. And this was very relevant because at the same time there was a project called the Tapestry project in the UK, which was very popular because it brought on art and technical and others, and they were looking at the threads. I think those of you that are familiar with the Bayeux tapestry from the 16th century, wherever it was, it tells a theme of what's happening through the history and then the others. So we took that note, and we could deliver to some extent a little bit more as a fun. By looking through themes, we can achieve something. And part of the simulations that we did, if we look at the left, these are various interests. And this is just in a simulation for a small samples. And then to the right, you could see the clusters to the themes which are related. And it was quite exciting as a PhD programs and what you do. Since then, I had another PhD student, Chelsea Dobbins, who still works in Liverpool, who took on the work further. And these days, you hear a lot more people talking about life logging. You know, they moved on in the technology and the idea. And many of the projects that she's doing now at the moment, she's using for health. In fact, one of her latest projects is looking at road rage, stresses in driving, by using psychology study, by having wearable clothes and others to see how you're moving and how you're reacting, to see whether you can control it. So these kind of things have got real applications. But when we were looking at the inputs, and you could see, many of you are very young in here, but back in the day, as the top left there, that was the end of qualitative multimedia, but now we are talking about augmented reality. So these things are changing, but they're interesting. The input devices, when we were looking, these are the early days of sensors, and we thought we can do. But they are a lot more sophisticated now, so you can go very, very rich. Video, because the early project we were looking at really do photos and videos. And you could see the generation from 59 to now, where videos is everywhere, captured everywhere, wherever you go and whatever you do. And anybody recognize this GVC VHS video recorder? Come on, show your age. Yes, good. This was famous for being in Back to the Future 1 for the young ones, because this is the VHS video they use. So if you ever look back again, you will see the red one VHS. Of course, they don't exist anymore. So these are part of the technologies. But now we are capturing video and information very rich everywhere. So it got me to think a little bit more now, because we would still, this is still, 14 years after Tony Hoare and the late Robert Milner suggested that this is one of the grand challenges for the next 50 years, just 14 years down the road, we have moved on so much in technology. It's just incredible. This is the world now we're dealing with, the Internet of Things, or the Internet everywhere and anywhere. It is everywhere. Now, if we want to capture, we capture it everywhere and everything. So, of course, the challenge in whenever we do memories is also being able to forget. And as a human, we have a capacity for forgetting, which is very, very important. When you have so rich, how can you cope with it? You must be able to forget it. But also for all of you as an audience of security, as of the 25th of May this year, by regulations from the EU, we can forget. We can make people who keep information on us forget us. Very important. The PDR regulation that says people have got the right to delete their records and others. So we can do. So these are also how we capture information. Now everyone talks about smart cities. Now you are traced, trained, and everywhere. So we can now truly build a digital memory which is amazingly rich, because wherever we are, whatever temperature, whatever places we go, we would do. And it will be ever increasing. I think you're familiar with some of the data, but it's frightening how the Internet anywhere and the Internet of Things, man machine, how it's moving to very, very big sets of billions and billions of devices. And therefore, on a positive way, how to capture. Now, the dream of having real digital human memories could be really something that you feel it, you smell it, you touch it, you can do any of those things through these technologies, because we have it everywhere. We can also have medical devices. I mean, many of you young people wear Fitbits, so you can actually have 24 hours how your sentiments were feeling, how you're going all day long. And all those things all can all be added, your locations, your other things. And these are all kind of devices that you can have around you. So a lot of fun for people who want to do those things. And the input devices, they moved on earlier on, 2004. We thought if we can do a few of these early sensors, now they're very, very sophisticated. You can do them. You can capture everything, and you can do a proper one. The context input also is moving. I don't know whether you're familiar, but the Digital Emily Project and the US Institute of Creative Technologies, they're literally recreating images. Say somebody happened in an accident or in a crime, and they tend to ask people through psychologists to recall. But now they're looking at an experiments where they try to wire you to get it from your subconscious. So your subconscious remembers a lot more than your conscious mind. And therefore, if you want to remember an accident or a crime, you're more likely to remember that. And I don't know how it will pan out, but nonetheless, this is part of the hope that you literally actually recreate memory that you're not aware of, or pictures you're not aware of. This is all very exciting that you can do. And this is only within 14 years when people say this is a grand challenge. You're familiar with Google Duplex, with the idea that instead of saying these call centers where the machine sounds like a a computer-generated voice, can we make it a little bit more humane? And it would be tailored to your area. So if you're in Scotland, it will give you an Edinburgh or a Glasgow accent. So you really feel you are talking more to a real person, in addition to all the AI. So now we are talking about if you want to have a real memory, one that we feel and we do, we can have an audience. I did a talk many years ago when we first started looking at this as a hobby. And one person in the audience asked me, I lost my father when I was 3 years old. I'd love to be able to hear that voice. Actually, it's achievable because you can do through these technologies now to recreate the sample. So it's all fun. Sharing memories is amazing. Those young people in the audience know all of these things. I think perhaps Bill knows some of them as well because he's very media oriented. So they're there. They're everywhere, and they're increasing by the day. Something which is interesting I share with you. This is about the young generations. You can't read it, so I shall read it for you. But it does capture the young among us. And he just says, I feel like I need to go and see the world. This is one friend saying to the others. And then they go on their travels. They go all around, and they take pictures of all these amazing sites. Maybe this is Loch Ness or Big Ben, whatever. And then halfway through there, he said, and yet, all I can think is this will make a great long journey entry logbook refreshing. So the newer generation is all about sharing. Never mind what we've seen is really how quickly can we send it and share it. And you see it in as a society changes, you see it in the restaurants. You see most of the young people now, the first thing they do is take a picture of the meals. It's not interested in eating, but in sharing. So this is very convenient and very interesting. And coming back to the theme now, we need the big data analytics to be able to do more of these things and to be able to forward. So deep learning and AI-based advanced techniques now help us to do a lot more to go through these very opaque systems. When we do memories, of course, earlier on when we looked at it is how to correlate data. You saw the early samples when we did a peer-to-peer collections of data. We did a lot of clustering, but we couldn't do as much as we can now because everything is on the cloud and you can get correlating to information to make a lot more sense of what it is. Enough one wonder when you go at the billions of devices. You can also do it for correlations of images because a lot of people like to send images, so you can search through them and you will do. And maybe, just maybe, the grand challenge that was posed by Tony Hoare and later Robin Milner, that in 50 years, it is getting nearer. It is exciting from one end for capturing, sharing, and dealing with these. And in particular, when you look at the new generations, they're all about that. So maybe we will do. But what happened? Perhaps we better watch it. As we go around, our life is uploaded. And this is perhaps for this audience of security today. All of these gatherings, everything about us is there. Do we want it? This is a question I asked rhetorically. I don't know. Some people said they want it, other people I don't. So on one hand, we'd want it, when we do not. So what about safety and security? And this is perhaps more your common stay in the audience who are all interested in safety and security. It raises a number of issues. I say honestly, although we had a team working in security, when I got excited by how does one capture digital memories? What does it mean for somebody who works in networking? How can we build systems? And even though I had a team working in security, we've never thought about security because it was mostly the excitement of, really, you can do something like that. Why not? So safety and security. And these, again, these are not solutions. This is really just an awareness. I think most of the audience would know, perhaps even more than I, but data outside there says huge sets of attacks. And it's increasing against devices. The very devices that I was excited earlier on about, because those allow us to capture information, to capture extra videos and others. Now they are being targeted. And they are increasing in target for criminals, for others, for embezzlement. And you could see real reports that we see earlier on in the mid-90s for critical infrastructure attacks. Now people are looking everywhere, and they're happening. So we should be aware of it if we are going towards a goal that people think it is important to capture human digital life memories, and all nations think it's important. Certainly UNESCO thinks it is. How do we protect on that? There is impact on safety. So the IoT gives us all of those. How do we, as an audience of security people, look at how to mitigate, how to reduce, how to address those things? Where do we go about that? Where do we start, in fact, too? And health concerns. I don't happen to have my Fitbit on today, but it's something I find quite useful. It tells you how much you sleep, what exercise, and others. But it tells many other things. And it's on the cloud, which means my record is kept forever. There are all kinds of things that are changing. When people want to apply for credit or a health checkup or whatever, all of these informations are everywhere somewhere. Can we get them? You can also have medical conditions that can be made worse, can be improved. I talked earlier on about road rage and wherever. Can we combat that? So we alert people that they're getting too anxious or too aggressive, and therefore they cool down while they're driving, but it can do worse. So we can help, and it can do worse. So how do we protect for those? Yes, we have legislations like the GDPR from the European Union that says you can make people forget you, but how much do you protect? Again, location traces and others. In Dubai, in UAE in particular, Abu Dhabi, you're seen everywhere because they have very modern devices for tracking for that. To ease traffic, to make it easier to provide services and others. But under the wrong hands, this could be misused and abused. And there are a number of projects, if you're aware, City Aware or Breach of Privacy and others, that you can do. And certainly CCTV, I think I was read an article somewhere, China has got the millions or hundreds of millions of CCTV everywhere now, and they can combat crime, but it could be misused for other things if we're not careful. Lately, you're all aware of Cambridge Analytica and how fake news and fake data and how it's been used. And this is on the small, but if we have a real digital life memories, how would we then support them, compare them? Can we make sure that everyone's talking about AI and deep learning and others? Can we make sure that somehow when we use them, we also protect? And there are techniques, of course, that some of you are not in. So security is an unlimited scope. There is a lot of work for all of us to do with security and what to do. And when you come to security, many of the devices in IoT are very small. You cannot get your protection systems that we do for big systems. These are very small devices. How do we stop them? And if they are central to capturing human memories and other important, we would need to look at solutions. And it's the same applies to the cloud. Can we lose? Can we ask for malicious financial gains and others? People are using them for blackmailing already to capture information. So, and of course, earlier on we said interaction is very important. So central to that is trust and reputation. And many of the mechanisms we use for trust and reputations are top-heavy. Can we find a way to make them so lightweight that they can go for small devices, not for every small devices, and therefore we would need a new mechanisms for creating trust and security for small devices because they're central. The IoT can be central tool. It is. There are some very nascent work where people look at how to build the techniques to protect. And big data analytics is all about AI these days. So if we have these banks of those things, how do we combat them? How do we do a little bit more? And identity safety, which is, I think some of you would be aware that you can do. But I don't know how many of you are aware of Alexander Martinez, whose identity was stolen. Anyone in the audience? Good. That means I'm telling you something new you don't know. That's very good. That's always good in a talk. Alexander Martinez is a young Frenchman who happened to subscribe to Instagram with a lot of pictures. As all the young people I mentioned earlier on, when they travel, it's not for seeing the mountains, it's for telling their friends, look what I've done, look where I've been. And a gentleman from Bulgaria who happened to have studied in France at one time decided to impersonate him. And he called himself Alexander Antonov. And he made, this is the real story, by the way, he made a real reputations in Bulgaria, but not through him, but through this alter ego, Jekyll and Hyde. So daytime he was one thing, at nighttime on the internet and others. And he became quite a celebrity in Bulgaria. He did many articles, he had much financial gains out of it, till eventually he was caught, and then they were traced. And of course, the real Alexander Fernandez in France was never aware that someone else was impersonating him. And he would say, I've been, when the other would been, and he managed to con many of the people. So identity theft in the new age and going further can be in the different guises. You don't have to have your ID card. You can also have your personality. So if we develop, and we need to develop these things, how do we protect against them more? So it's rather at one level very sad, but it's a sort of amusing. This is a story that just came out in February this year about Alexander Fernandez. So everyone around here and everywhere talks about AI. Are we moving with all of this development to a human digital clone? How many of you have seen Ex Machina? Very good. I'd recommend it for the young ones. This has a BAFTA award and many other awards. It's a science fiction. I happen to be even more proud of it because this robot model was modeled on my young daughter, who happened to be working as the production team in the costume designs, and they used her size and wherever, so I'm even more proud. And this, for those of you, I haven't done one for the story, but basically they create these clones who look like a human, and at the end there is a twist. It's very, very interesting to do. So those of you who have seen Ex Machina, can you imagine if that clone has also got all the memories? It was also real in the movie, and you would do. So by having all those technologies. So it's a very, very interesting movie, which, as I said, I'd recommend. So for those budding young researchers in here, this is the kind of thing that we would need to address in security. Trust, I mentioned earlier on. How do we do it in a big scale, but very cheap? And how do we deal with extra information for context buffering? Because real notation, real impersonations can believe. We have a deceptive technology because now we can have all those memories and others, and we can use the ideas of a honeypot for getting and grabbing people. Privacy preservation in the cloud, it's still an issue because although now we have regulation that says you can be forgotten, but it's very difficult to find everything that they found about us and what we do. And when we have security, do we have extra support for cognitive security? Because we would need to go beyond just the idea of just an AI and do it even more, because human beings are always a bit more as predicting something a bit more than just what AI. And certainly AI for the very near future is still limited. Oops. I'm nearly finishing, but I didn't. So authentications, and I know Bill and others are looking at the blockchain. Can we do physical and clonable functions for small devices? Can blockchain goes to very, very small devices? At the moment, we talk about big systems. Can it? Because then we would know the devices that are really collecting information on us are do it. Systems of keyless login signatures and others, we can do them for big systems, but can we move them? Can we move this biometric information further in, downstream to very, very low devices? These are all challenges in security that I'm hoping the young people in here will address. Perhaps it's a bit too late for me to deal with. And so in conclusion, I went over what I think was, what certainly was started as a fun project for us, literally just to say, what is digital life memories for people who work in networking and computer systems? How do we do with that? To moving on to networking, to then leading on to the current state of affairs when we have IoT and big data and others. And since now everyone talks about AI, and perhaps I frightened some of the audience about you can be cloned, you can be stolen your memories and wherever, I'll leave you with a reassuring note. The Professor Pearl, the father of machine learning, as a mathematicians and a computer scientist and others, came up with the quotes in one of his books. Don't worry about the computer until they ask why. Because wherever we talk about AI, they're still limited. We don't have that extra cognitive things. When they ask why, at the moment they're machines, they do machines, then when we should really be worried. So for all of you that I frightened a little bit, don't worry too much about AI till the computer starts asking why, and then we might have a problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you.